Hey guys, welcome to Module 3.2 of. Hey guys, welcome to Module 3.2. We're going to look at creating the Constitution. So we've already looked at the Articles of Confederation and how that was created to manage our country. Now we're going to look at the Constitution. So our essential questions that we're going to focus on are: how did the principles of the Articles of Confederation lead to the need for a new Constitution? Which arguments over the power and authority of the national government led to compromise? And so we're going to start off with looking at the Articles of Confederation. We're going to really look at the weaknesses of the Articles itself. And so one of the weaknesses that it had is that each state has one vote in Congress, regardless of size. So one vote per state was how it worked. Then Congress had no power to tax. So we already know that the American Revolution happened, and there was a lot of money that was spent on it by the colonists, and so we're going to have to repay those debts somehow. But the national government doesn't have that power at this point. There's no executive branch, so there's really no head person that represents our country, and this is kind of a thing that we wanted to go against from what we came from, where we had England and had a monarchy and had a king. We didn't want this extreme executive power for our government, so we didn't create one with the Articles of Confederation. There was no national court system. It was all individualized courts by each state. And also, amendments required a unanimous vote. So, if we wanted to add to anything to the Articles of Confederation, it took a 13 out of 13 votes for it to be added. And so, lastly, states printed their own money. So, at this point, we're seeing that there are deficiencies within the government, and it's creating many issues within the states. And so, these issues are going to cause problems within our country. And so the first problem, or the biggest problem that we see of, is Shays' Rebellion. And so with Shays' Rebellion, many former revolutionary soldiers are now farmers, and they have high debts because, one, they're not getting paid by the federal government with the after the American Revolution. And so Daniel Shay leads a group to rebel over money owed in Massachusetts. And what ends up happening is the federal government is unable to help because they don't have like this federal army to try to put it down. And so local militia raised to put down the rebellion. And really what this does show, it shows the Articles are too weak and a new government is needed because they were not able to respond to this event. They needed something to fix this issue, and it just really brought to light things that needed to be fixed for us to be able to move on as a country. And so we have the Constitutional Convention meet. And it happened in Philadelphia, and it met in 1787. And each state sent representatives to decide to how to create this new government rather than fix the articles. And truth is, their intent of going at first was to just fix these issues that were wrong with the Articles of Confederation. How do we make them stronger? But as time got there, we saw that Articles of Confederation maybe is not what our country needs, and so they decide that we are going to create a new form of government. And so some of the key figures that are there, you have George Washington, and he leads the convention as president, but kept quiet throughout the discussions. Quiet leader. Then there was a guy named James Madison from Virginia. He is the father of the Constitution because he wrote most of it. He's the one that kept a lot of the minutes, and he was the one that put it all together into one document. Then there's a guy named Alexander Hamilton. Okay, and he is from New York, and he argued that there should be a strong central government. Then you have another guy named Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania, and he says that states must hold more power. Then you've got another dude called George Mason, and he is a strong believer in the idea of Bill of Rights, and he looked at the English Bill of Rights as a example in how we should have a Bill of Rights. And then the last guy is named Roger Sherman of Connecticut. And he thinks small states should not be overlooked. He said that just because you've got more people in another state, small states need to still have some kind of power within a federal government. And so what we come down to is these different plans that emerge. And so the first plan was proposed by a guy named James Madison, and he was from the great state of Virginia at this point. And so in Madison's view, he proposed that a strong central government should be created with 3 branches of government, with a legislative, judicial, and executive branch. And he molded this idea or this plan upon Baron Montesquieu, where he had separation of powers and checks and balances within the government. And so he says that in this legislative branch, we would be bicameral. I mean, there's 2 houses, one House of Representatives and the Senate. So if we look back at the parliamentary system that we come from England, in the Parliament there's a House of Commons and the House of Lords. And so we could model this in America, and the House of Lords is your Senate and your House of Commons is your House of Representatives. And he also said the people would elect the House members, and the Senate would be elected by the people of the House. And so it's not a direct election of senators in his plan. The only ones that are directly elected by the people are the House members. Then you've got James Patterson that comes up with the New Jersey plan. Now, New Jersey is a smaller state if you compared to Virginia, okay? And so under his plan, he said that the Articles of Confederation should just be amended. There should be a unicameral legislature with 1 vote per state. But in addition, the federal government would gain the powers to raise funds via tariffs and other measures, to regulate commerce between the states and commerce with other nations. And so, this debate goes on and on. So we've got big states versus small states. And so the debate rages until you got a guy named Roger Sherman, okay? He comes up with the Connecticut Compromise, or the Great Compromise. And in the compromise, he called for a 2-house legislature, one based upon the population, so that's your House of Representatives, and a more powerful house, the Senate, based upon equal representation, okay? So every state would get the same amount of votes. Also, while in the House, each state had a different number of representatives, it was based upon the number of people they had in the state. And to help figure that out, we were going to have a census every 10 years to determine the number of people that live in the state, so you can have a correct number of representatives. And it also included an executive branch and judicial branch, but it really focused on the legislature, because the legislature is where laws are directly made in our form of government. Okay, and so we can see the breakdown in the graphic organizer between the New Jersey and Virginia, and how this great compromise comes together, where you've got the 2-house legislature, equal representation, and then representation based upon population. Okay, and so population. So we've said, all right, we would like this great compromise, but in the South was like, hey, we've got a lot of people in our states, but they may not be full citizens. They may be slaves, okay? And so we think slaves should count towards our population because they are people in our state. Now, northern states were like, ho, 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 ho. They're slaves, so according to you, they are not people. And so to satisfy the southern states, they come up with this idea of a 3/5 compromise. Okay, and so it said that for census purposes, um, that slaves would be counted 3/5 of a person. Okay, so for every 5 slaves that are counted, 3 would count towards the official census. And so just it's overinflating the numbers of the southern states, thus giving them more power so they can make sure that slavery is not going to be ended. Because if you remember, back in the Declaration of Independence, there was the opportunity for the United States to say that slavery was bad and we weren't going to do it in our country. But we had to take it out so we could get the Declaration of Independence passed. Now, you can see in the graphic organizer for what the southern states wanted, what the northern states wanted, and how the 3/5 compromise was going to count. Okay? Now, the next compromise that comes about is the Electoral College. Okay, so we've got legislatures, we've got our legislatures figured out, but hey, what about our president? If we're going to have a president, if we're going to have some kind of executive branch, how are we going to vote for him? Is it a 1-for-1 vote? And so what they decided is like, oh, all right, we're going to have Electoral College to elect our president. And so what this did is distributed the power to elect the president equally among the states. Each state representative branch would elect electors who would elect the president, not the people. The people only elected House members. Therefore, the House was seen as the body of the people. And the size of the Electoral College is equal to the total number of membership of both houses of Congress, meaning there's 435 representatives, and there's 100 senators, and there's 3 electoral votes for Washington, D.C. And so there's 538 electors. And really, when you look at it, it is like in the state of North Carolina, we've got 13 representatives and we've got 2 senators. So we've got 15 electoral votes. The bare minimum of electoral votes is 3. Because remember, everybody's guaranteed a House member and everybody's guaranteed 2 senators. So we get 3 as the minimum that you can have in Electoral College. And so you have to get 270 votes to win. You have to get a majority plus 1 because you can tie it 268 and 268, and then at that point no one wins. It has to go to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives decide who wins. And you can kind of look at the last census about who gained and who lost. This year, they're predicting that North Carolina is going to gain another representative, so we're going to be up to 16 electoral votes, which is the same as Georgia. And really, North Carolina is one of the top 10 states in the country, and so you can see that California has the most. Then it goes to New York. Well, New York, Florida, and Texas are the top 4 earners, or the top 4 gets for electoral colleges. And we always know that California is a Democratic leaning, so is New York. Texas is a Republican leaning. Florida is a 50-50 state where it can go either way. It can go be a Democrat or Republican. It just depends on who's up for election at this point. And so you can see how our states are broken up. You see a lot of the Midwest states are Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota. All these have low populations, so they have very few electoral votes. Same thing for Alaska. And so here's the breakdown of the information through your states' rights supporters, federal powers, and the presidential compromise that comes out of this, okay? Now, last compromise that we're going to look at is the slave trade compromise. And under this, the southern states agreed that the federal government was going to be able to do interstate commerce and commerce around the world. or create treaties and stuff like that, as long as the slave trade didn't end for another 20 years. And so that was the compromise that had to be made to get this, to get the Constitution passed. And so if we can look at how the southern states viewed the slave trade and commerce, and the northern states viewed it, then you got the compromise that came about from it. And so we're going to look at, so to end this off, we're going to look at goals and principles of the Constitution. So we're going to look at the preamble first, and we're going to look at the articles. Then we're going to talk about the amendments, and lastly finish up with the 7 basic principles of the Constitution. And so the first thing we're going to look at is the preamble. And so the preamble to the Constitution goes as: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. And so this is the opening statement that gives the purpose of the Constitution, but it also defines the 6 goals of the Constitution. So the 6 goals are: 1, to form a more perfect union. And so we look at this as a unification of our states. The founding fathers saw that because the Articles of Confederation were weak and did not do what they needed to do, we needed to be more unified as a country. Then to establish justice, we want to make sure that we are going to have law applied fairly to all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or gender. The third thing is to ensure domestic tranquility. That means that we're going to have peace within our borders, peace at home. Then provide for the common defense. We're going to look at to give protection from government power, or give the government power to protect citizens all over the United States. The 5th thing is to promote the general welfare, to promote the well-being of all citizens, as health and happiness. And lastly, it's to secure the blessings of liberty, and its freedom and rights for all our people. And so we can see domestic tranquility is really talking about a peace at home, and then we look at common defense. We're looking at defense from the rest of the world, and we're looking to make sure that we're protected from people like China or North Korea that want to come attack us, or terrorism. Okay, and so like it says, the preamble is that opening statement, and so we get into the articles, and the articles are broken into 7 different parts, and these are the main body of the Constitution, and it's really, the articles are more like sections, and these are the framework of how our government's going to work. And so Articles 1, 2, and 3 describe the 3 branches, and so it goes: the legislative branch in Article 1, executive branch in Article 2, and judicial branch in Article 3. Then Article 4 deals with the relations between the states. So how is the relationship between North Carolina and South Carolina going to work? Then 5 provides how to process on how to amend the Constitution. And the thing about the amendment or amendments to the Constitution, the reason they wanted to add the ability to have amendments to the Constitution is because the founding fathers saw that this document, the Constitution, is a moving document, meaning that it is alive and can be changed over time when new things arise. And as society changes, that the Constitution can be amended. And there's so then it goes to Article 6, which states the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Okay? Nothing's above it. It is the highest law of the land. And then Article 7 is a procedure on how to ratify the Constitution. And so if we look at the amendments, on over 200 years, there's been 27 amendments that have been added to the Constitution. The first 10 were the Bill of Rights that were added in 1791. And Article 5 outlines the process as 2 ways. 1, amendment may be proposed by 2/3 of both houses, or can be 2/3 of state legislatures. But then for it to be ratified, it must be approved by 3/4 of the states. Okay, so if 3/4 of the states don't put the amendment up on ballot and they don't vote for it, it will never get passed.
Sorry, I'm having
Next, the 7 basic principles of the Constitution. Now, these are important to remember. So we've already talked about popular sovereignty, where people rule. They have the right to alter, abolish it. The rules and regulations that were reinforced by John Locke's philosophy. Then limited government. The Magna Carta idea is because the colonists wanted to avoid tyranny. They said that government has only the powers that the Constitution gives it. Okay, and so no more, no less than what the Constitution says they have. Separation of powers. The separation of powers, checks and balances. It really goes back to Montesquieu's ideas. It says government is split between 3 parts. There's your legislative branch that makes the laws, executive branch that carries and enforces the laws, and judicial is what they explain and interpret the laws in the meaning of the United States, in the realm of the United States. And checks and balances, where each branch has no more power than the other branch. So they're all equal branches. Okay. Then there's federalism, and so it's division of power between the federal government and the states. And so you've got the federal power, then you got state power, then you got local government. Okay. And so examples of federal power is 1, to coin money, declare war, and regulate trade between states. So things that states do. Okay. They regulate trade within borders. So if Johnston County is trading with Wake County, they regulate that. The federal government regulates trade between North Carolina and South Carolina. Okay? And then also power not clearly given to the federal government belongs to the states. And so if the Constitution doesn't say it, it belongs to the states. It is their right as a state to have these. And so the last 2 ones of the 7 basic principles are republicanism. And it leads back to the idea of popular sovereignty. But republicanism, the government of Rome, where citizens elect representatives that carry out their will. Okay? And last one's individual rights, where the Constitution was created to make sure that our rights as individuals are protected, such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to trial by jury. And so, guys, that ends the PowerPoint for Module 3.2. Make sure you answer all the questions that went through the Edpuzzle and fill out your note sheet that goes with it. Thank you.